Boker Tov. Today's Daf is Daf Pei Dalet in Baba Basra was even for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael soon but Sarva Shifia. We're at the two dots in middle of Pei Dalet and Aleph. Shachmamas Fim Salavana. If a person bought, there's a buyer and a seller. The seller told him that he's selling him. We'll see. That means red wheat, and it turns out that it's white, or vice versa. In all these cases that we enumerated here, different kinds of wood, different wine versus vinegar. In all these cases, they can both go back on the deal because they each meant to say, they could each claim, I didn't mean to sell you that, or I didn't mean to buy that. So what's the lashon of shachmosis? Levana we know means white. Amar Papa says the Gemara, Midiktani Levana Shma Mino Hai Shimsha Sumkasihi. What's going on here? Wheat has two colors, says Rashbam. Two colors and no more. So if one is white, the other one's got to be red. So what's that lashon of shachmomis? Like chama, it's just the root in that word is the chama, the sun. So he says if one is, the Mishnah says that if you bought let's say white wheat, or and it turned out that it's red, or if you bought red wheat and thought that it's white, they can both go back on the deal. Each one could say, no, I meant the other one. Okay. So Papa says since one is Levana and there's only two colors, red and white. So that means Shmamino Hai Shimsha Simkasi. Why was it called Shachmamas? Just say Simka, say red, right? Just say red, to just say the color red. Why talk about the Lashon relating it to the sun? So Levana, since one is Levana and the other one must be red, you see over here that the sun must be red. It says Yisai Shimsha Simkasi, because that's why it's called Shachmamit. It's either red or white. Those are the two colors that we have. What's the proof? So he says the fact that it calls it shachmasis, which is the root of which is the sun. You see that the sun is red. Tater, what's the proof that it's red? The kasamka saprapanya, when the sun, early in the morning when the sun rises, and in the evening when the sun sets, it's reddish in color. It's like a dark reddish. You see that. So why the whole day when we look at the sun, you don't see red, you only see white or yellow? The reason we don't see it the whole day red is our eyesight isn't good, because since the sun's rays are so powerful, can't look at it directly, and our eyesight isn't good enough to discern that it's really a reddish color. Okay, so that's what he says. You see from here the fact that he calls it shachmasis. The issue in the mission is, of course, is that it's a mekach. I say I bought red wheat. Maybe that's early in the early stage when it grows. I don't know, or the later stage, but I wanted red and you gave me white, or vice versa. So you see over here that since he calls it shachmasis, that the sun is actually red. Meisvei, how can you say it's red? Pasukun talks about the negoim, like Sarah says, it's mareu, the appearance of the saras, of the plague on the skin is amokmana, or is deeper than the skin. That the appearance on the person's skin is deeper than the regular skin, and that's what the pasuk says. And he says kamare chama amuka menatzel. The Bryce says that the Bryce on that says that what's the comparison? Like the sun is deeper than the side of the sun is deeper than the shadow. It's a deeper color. The awesome lavanu. There we're talking about the leprosy, the plague on the skin is white. That's how can you say the sun is red? It says when it comes to leprosy, it says the appearance of the disease on the skin is deeper than the skin. So much so, like the appearance of the sun is deeper than that of the shadow. So apparently we're comparing it to leprosy, which is white. So the Gemara, so it's white. So which is the sun? Is the sun red or is it white? The answer is kamari chama v'lo kamar. It's like the appearance of the sun, but not exactly like the sun. Kamari chama damu kamanatzel. It's like the appearance of the sun, that the appearance of the sun is deeper than that of the shadow. However you see that, you discern that. V'lo kamar, but it's not exactly like the chamadi v'hasam lavan. But when it comes to the tsaras, the sight of the appearance of the leprosy on the skin is white, and here it's red. He's not comparing it to the sun in what color it is. The sun is red and the skin is white. But he means he's comparing in the Mishnah, the Bryce, it compares. I mean, so the pasuk says a mareu amokman, or it's deeper. So much so, like the sun is deeper than the shadow, but it doesn't mean it's the same color. It's just a deeper shade, and therefore that's the comparison. But really, sure, Tsaras is white, and the sun is actually red. We just can't see it. Says in your question, when you thought that the sun was really white, like the leprosy, that was your question. The sun is really white. So Hakasamka Safran, what do you do with the fact that it's clear that we do see, and many times you can see it's very rare that we see it today. I don't know, because of all the pollution or whatever that he says, but sometimes you could see that the sun is reddish. He says apparently they saw that the sun was very reddish in the evening at sunrise and sunset. So if you're trying to say in your kashi, you said, well, how can you say that it's red? The pasuk is mashma that it's white, or the way the Bryce explains the pasuk. So he thought that it's white. What about the fact that we do see red in the morning and in the evening? The answer is it's really in the kasha. We assume the truth is that it's really red. It's really red. But in the kasha, when we thought that it was white, that the sun was white, we see that it's red and white. It's red in the morning and the evening. The answer is Bitsafra. In the morning, the reason it's white, the Chalfa Beivar the Gan Eden, because it passes in the east. It passes by the roses of Gan Eden, which are reddish, and that gives us a reddish hue. It's got a reddish hue. That's why. Whereas we thought that it's white, except it's sort of reflecting the roses of Gan Eden. Panya in the evening, the Chalfa Pesachem, there it passes the opening of Gehenna. The fire of Gehenna, fire is reddish, and that's why that it has that appearance. And it was just the Maisa were saying that it's really red all the time. We just can't see it during the day. It's just our sight isn't good enough to discern the red. But if you thought that it's white, it could be that in the morning, the evening, it's red. It's reddish because either because it passes by the roses of Gan Eden in the morning and the fire of Gehenna in the evening. Some say the other way around. In the morning, when it rises in the east and Gehenna is in the west, so the reflection, the rays go from the east to the west. So the reflection, it's reflecting Gehenna in the morning, and in the evening, when it sets in the west, it's reflecting the Gan Eden in the east, as it says, Gan Eden mi Kedem in the east. It says so the Gan Eden's in the east, and the Gehenna is in the west. That's a good one. The west is really Gehenna today, right? West with a capital W. Yeah. All right, says the Mishnah said, now we get a little bit of a svarim. Now, today we make vinegar straight up, but in the olden days, vinegar was really just wine that went sour. It's also a kind of vinegar. There's many kinds of vinegar. My wife sent me the other day to get rice vinegar. I never even heard of that. I don't even know. This wine vinegar, yeah, there's different kinds, but the vinegar, usually in the Gemara, was it. But sometimes even if vinegar was rotten wine, or wine that went bad, sometimes they needed vinegar, whatever the recipe was, So it says if a guy bought wine and it turned out it was vinegar, so they can both go back on the deal. The seller could say, oh, the vinegar is going for more money now. I need the vinegar. I gave you wine by mistake. Same thing that I gave you vinegar. I want it back. And the seller and the buyer could say, no, I wanted wine. I didn't want vinegar. They can both go back on the deal. So it sounds like those are two different species, so to speak. They're two different things. Yain v'nim tzachomit shnei yichon lachzro. Says lemasis in the Rebbe. The Chor Mishnah goes like Rebbe below Rabbanan, and not like Rabbanan. Where we have machlokes, the Tanya on Amid Beis. Yain v'chometz min echadu. Is wine and vinegar really the same species? Obviously, there's different tastes to them, but it's really the same thing. Just how its way it starts out to produce, but it's really one min. Rebbe Yom Shtei it's 2 min. Now, what's the machlokas over there? The machlokas over there is very simple. Wine is one of the 7 things that you give Tumas on Maisus on Midaraisa. Wine, Shemen Zayis, those two liquids, and the 5 grains are what you have to give Tumas on Maisus on of not Maisus Behem, of course. I'm not from crops, things that grow in the ground. Those now, let's say I'm a farmer or whatever I have, and I have yayin and chometz, wine and vinegar. Can I give trumas and meisters from one on the other? Right? If it's the same thing, I could do it. If I have a lot of wheat, I can give from wheat. Can't give from wheat on barley or barley on wheat or wine on barley or wine on wheat, but I can give from wheat on wheat. Even good wheat and bad wheat, it's all wheat, right? Not all exactly the same. So is wine and vinegar the same thing? So the Tanakama says, yain v'chometz is one thing. It's one thing you give trumas from meisters from one or the other. Another mafmina, Rashbam says, very interesting. We've learned that when do you swear a shvua d'oraisa? Usually to deny money. One of the famous shvuas d'oraisa. One is Eid Echad is Machayv Shvua, but another one, another case is a famous case of motive b'mixas. You say that I owe you 100 bushels of wheat, and I admit that I owe you 20 bushels. Okay, the other 80 I got to swear on. That's called motive mixas. What happens if I say you tell me that I owe you 100 bushels of wheat, and I admit that I owe you 20 bushels of barley? That's not motive b'mixas. It's got to be minataina. So here the question is this: if let's say you say, oh, I owe you 100 barrels of wine, and I admit that I owe you 20 barrels of vinegar, is vinegar and wine the same thing or not? If you say it's the same min, then it's motive mixas ataina. If it's not the same min, it's not the same species, then it's not motive mixas ataina. It's like barley and wheat, two different things. So the Rabbanan say yain chametz is one thing. Whether it's trumas or maestras or whether it's a motive mixas, it's one thing. Rabbi says it's two minim. So from our Mishnah, when you say, if I sold you wine and I gave you wine, I gave you vinegar, or vice versa, they can both go back in the deal because they're two separate things. That's mashma like Rebbe and not like the Rabbanan. That says they're two separate things. Says the Gemara, no. Afil tim Rabbanan. The Rabbanan who say that it's one min could even agree in our Mishnah too. Why? When did Rabbanan disagree with Rebbe in terms of is it one min or two min that the Rabbanan say one min? Rebbe says two min elinyan ma'aser u'truma. It becomes ma'aser and truma. Why? Because ma'aser and truma technically it's the same species, but it means that you can give from one on the other, right? If you give trumas or ma'asers, you can give from barley on wine on vinegar and vinegar on wine. Why? Famous Rush, we've had many places adjustment. When you have, let's say you have good wheat and bad wheat, what should you do? You should give trumas and maasros from the good wheat on the good wheat. You should give from the best stuff. But if you didn't, you gave from bad stuff, you're still yotzei. How do you give? Let's say I have good wheat and I have bad wheat. So I have to give the coin, the trumas, and the maasros to the Levi, and I'll give him the bad stuff. Well, what's the difference? He's getting it for free anyway. So it's not the right thing to do, but if you give it, it's a good truma. Minayin and you should give the good stuff, but if you don't, you'll carry a sin when you give the fat from it. In other words, when you separate the trumas and you give the bad stuff, you'll be a sinner. Now, if it's not truma at all, if I say I have good wheat and bad wheat, and I give from a truma from the bad wheat for the good wheat. If I'm not yotzei, it's not a sin. I have to start all over again. If it's not trumas, if I have wheat over here and I give some barley, I got trumas maestros from barley on the wheat. It's not trumas maestros. I got to start. I owe the wheat. So over here he says, if you give from bad on good, you're going to carry a sin. Don't do that because if you do, you'll carry a sin. Why is there a sin? If it's not kaddish, if it doesn't work, the sea is chet lama. Why are you carrying a sin? You didn't do anything. It's meaningless, right? If I give barley to the Kohen and meiser and barley meiser to the Levi on wheat, that I didn't do anything. It's meaningless. It's just a gift. Lama see from truma when it comes to trumas and meisers, if you give bad from bad on good, it's still the same thing and it's good. And the same thing would be, let's say, for the shvua. Motive mix, that's technically it's the same species. So if I give trumas and meisers from one or the other, okay. Even if from bad on good, if I give from vinegar on wine, I thought vinegar is worse. I'm yotzei. According to the Rabbanan, Rabbi says no, they're two separate species. When it comes to buying and selling, if I wanted wine, I wanted wine. I don't care what I don't care what it is. If I wanted this kind of sugar, I wanted that kind of sugar. I wanted this kind of salt, I wanted that kind of salt. Whatever I want. Everybody agrees. Some people want wine. They don't want vinegar. It depends what your recipe is. Depends what your needs are. If I'm going to make kiddush, if I'm buying wine to make kiddush, I don't want vinegar, right? So that's the point over here. That even if you claim, like the Rabbanan, that yain and chometz are the same species, and when it comes to motive and mixas, I can be motive from one on the other, and that's motive mix and chayav shvua. And when it comes to trumas and maasros, it's good trumas and maasros. But when it comes to buying and selling, that's our understanding. When you come to buy and selling something, there has to be an understanding. I want this, I don't want that. So that everybody agrees that, and our mission that everybody can go back on the deal because each guy can claim, I meant to sell you something else or I meant to buy something else. I wanted the good one.
I have two trees.
Yeah.
One a lemon tree and one
You have
a
to
lemon tree.
You have to give Trumas Meiser on each one separately.
Each one separate.
Of course, you can't give, exactly. That's what you have to do, right?
You can't mix. Right?
Correct. Those are definitely two separate species. But if you made wine, let's say you made some wine, you know, you're one of those guys who make them in the bathtub, you know, make it wine, and it turned into vinegar. So you got wine and vinegar. You can, according to Rabbanan, you can give from one on the other.
How you can start?
Hmm?
How you can start? Two species to take olive
From two different grains, two different kinds of grain. If they're both chayiv, yeah, right. If they're both chayiv, yeah. If they have to be attached together.
You don't have a shear.
If you're together, if they're attached, right. Very good. We're learning challah we're finishing challah this Masechet this week in Yerushalmi. Masechet challah in Yerushalmi, talk about that. Very good. Now we're going to get into the truth is we should look at the Gemara is going to talk about this later on, but we're talking about buying and selling what constitutes a kinyan. We've explained many times that you can only buy and sell something if they both agree, right? We did say Pli V'Zavans Venus Vina. We did say that, right? We had that before, that if I was forced to sell something at gunpoint, they paid me for it. You know, Pli V'Zavans could be a sale, but they both have to agree on what's going on over here. Let's say you have a regular buy and a sell. A guy comes into a store and wants to buy something and didn't agree on a price yet. He's lifting it up. He's looking at it. He's deciding on it. He made hakbah. He made a kinyan. Is that a kinyan? No, because there's no understanding yet. There's no agreement between the buyer and the seller, right? You went into the showroom and you kicked the tires of the car. That doesn't mean that you bought the car till there's an agreement, right? You have to agree on the price. Okay, so what's the way you make a kinyan once you agree on a price? So there's different kinyanim. The rabbis instituted kinyanim to show us like a symbolic gesture to show that you are, but what really makes the kinyan happen is the fact that the seller wants to sell it and the buyer wants to buy it. So even if he's forced, but he wants to do it at the end. So if you sell pesach, how do you make a kinyan? So the simplest kinyan, hakbah, lifting it up, is the preferred way if it's something that's light and easily picked up. And as we'll see, the hakbah works any place. I could pick it up. It could work even in Rosh Hashanah. Wherever I pick it up, if I picked it up, it's like mine. If there's an agreement, the guy wants to sell it to me, right? If I pick it up, it's mine. That works anyway. However, not everything can be picked up. Some things are heavy. Can't pick it up. It's not something. It doesn't mean that we judge each person individually, but it means something that generally is easily lifted up, something very light, that you should do hakbah. If it's something that's heavier, big bags or something that's heavier, you pull it into your possession. What does your possession mean? Obviously, if you pulled it into your own yard, that's correct. We'll see. Even if you build it into a semi-private area like a simta, an area off the Rosh Hashanah, between Rosh Hashanah and the courtyards of the individuals, that works there. Or it's a chutzah that belongs to two people. You have to pull it into your. If you pull it into in Rosh Hashanah, that doesn't mean anything. You're just pulling it. You're pulling it on the floor. You didn't lift it up. So that's Mashiach. That's the next thing. Something that can't even be pulled. It's too heavy, like an elephant or a boat or something heavy. We learn handing over the reins or handing over the rope. What do we say the word is? Hauser. There you go. That's the best word. Nobody knew that word, right? Yeah. Right. So if you hand over the hauser, that's good, and that works even Rosh Hashanah. That works anyway. Rosh Hashanah or a chutzah doesn't belong to. That's when you do Masira. Okay. So those are the basic kind of kinyan. We know there's also kinyan chalipin. Comes to karka, kesef shtar chazaka works. We've discussed all that. Now the Mishnah is going to talk about you're buying something and what constitutes, when there's questions, what constitutes the kinyan. I sell you peros. Reuven sells Shimon peros. Mashach below madad. Let's say he pulled them. Okay, again, what does it mean pulled them? He pulled them into, as we said, into an area, either his own rishus or a simta, semi-private area, or a chutzah that belongs even to two people. But he pulled them, that's a kinyan, made Mashiach. Of course, after an agreement to the price, they both agreed. Let's say we just measured them out. The seller, in this case, we'll see. He's talking about when the seller measured the stuff out. He just took about, how much would you like? A kilo? He measured it out, but there was no Mashiach. And he didn't put it into the kalim, he didn't put it into the container of the okay. Now in this country you're used to that, right? Not like in the old country where they gave you bags and stuff like that. Here you bring your own bag or your own basket or whatever. If they put it into your own basket, your own container, okay, that could be a kinyan. But over here we measured it out, and the buyer did not pull it, did not make mashicha, and the seller did not put it into the lokech, the purchaser's receptacle. Then he doesn't acquire it. Doesn't acquire it. The Gemara is going to explain all this in more detail. Okay, the Rashi already tells us he measured it in his own. He says, I got a box over here. I got whatever. I got a barrel. I measured out a barrel of wine or whatever, but it's the mocher's own. Even if he put it down in a semi-private area, that's not a kinyan. But if he put it into the receptacle of the, the kid goes into a store, right? And the guy gives him something and he puts it into the kid came in with his own bag, with his own receptacle, his own container, then that acquires it for him. If he was smart, let's say the buyer wants to make this acquisition. He's in the seller's store, whatever possession, seller's house or whatever, store, and he wants to make the kinyan, he wants to make sure that the seller's not going to go back on the deal. Socher es makoman. He can rent from the seller that spot. If you rent that seller that spot, that means that's karka that you've rented. A rent is a partial sale. It's a limited time sale. And once you own that spot, the karka, the chutzner is konen for you. It's your chutzner. I own this balata. I'm going to rent this balata from you, this tile, and I own that, and that's karka. So if I own that, and you put the stuff in my balata, on my tile, that acquired it for me like my chutzner. Let's say you bought something that's very light, flax, feathers, or whatever, something very light. You got to pick it up. Means you pick it up, you move it from place to place. Doesn't mean that's obviously you're going to move it into your own spot, but the point is, even if you pick it up, even if you're in the seller's store, once you picked it up, you bought a loaf of bread, something light, you picked it up, it's yours, assuming that there was an agreement on the price. Let's say this stuff, these flax was attached to the ground, the talish kolshu kana, and you cut off a little bit, you're a kana. So the Gemara is going to talk about this. What do you mean? If you cut off a little bit, how you kana the whole thing? When it basically means that he took some possession in the karka, took possession of the karka. Then by showing possession, then the flax which is still attached to the ground is he acquires it, because that's either like the kinyan agav. If I get the karka, I get the metalton with it. I bought your house, I get the car or anything else that we acquired, even if it's not there, can be acquired either kinyan agav, or we'll see the Gemara will talk about how that kinyan works. Amar Basi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So he says like this, or if there's really a question Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan was the Mardas in Eretz Yisrael, and he had many Talmidim. Some of us we're going to see here. He had a Talmud Ravasi, he had a Talmud Rav Zera, he had a Talmud Yaakov. Amar Basi and Rabbi Yochanan. He says, our Mishnah just said, Modat v'lo mashach lo kana. Our Mishnah said, if the seller measured it out, the buyer did not pull it. He did not make mashicha. And the seller just measured it out in his own container. That's not a kinyan. Let's say he measured it out and he just put it down on the floor of a semi-private area. A semi-private area where anybody can basically use that area. It's like everybody's. Whoever wants to use it can use it. Right? You acquire it. So now listen to this dialogue. Rav Zera said to Rav Asi, what do you mean? He put it down on the floor and the buyer buys it. The seller measured out something, put it down on the floor of a simta. Yes, anybody could say, I'm using this simta now, I'm using this, anybody can, but he didn't put it in his receptacle, he didn't put it in the buyer's container, that's okay. Maybe you, he said it with respect, Rebbe, you called Rav Asi Rebbe, maybe you, when you heard this teaching of Rav Yochanan, maybe you were talking about Ela b'model of Kapaso, when the seller measured it out into the container of the buyer. There it might work. Amalei. So Rav Asi said, no, even on the floor. Dami Haimer Abana, what do you think? Rav Zera, you think Kedalo Gami Inchi Shmaita? You think I didn't hear what he said? Do you think when I say something I didn't understand what he said? I said he put it on the floor, not in a receptacle, right? Member boy. What do you mean? If he measured it out, if the seller measured it out into the container of the buyer, do you have to teach me that? That's obvious. If he's in the container of the buyer is Kona wherever it is. What's the chiddush in that? I wouldn't have said that. Kibli minei or lo kibli minei. Now, did Rav Zera accept this that Rav Asi told him? Did he accept me to say that if you measured it out, even if you put it on a simta on the floor, that's a good kinyan, and it doesn't have to be in the receptacle? Did Rav Zera accept that or not? Did Rav Zera accept what Rav Asi said or not? Tashma, let's try to prove it. Tashma, Rav Yanai, I'm a Rebbe. Rav Yanai said the name of Rebbe. Rav Yanai was a student of Rebbe and a Rebbe of Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Yanai himself was a teacher of Rabbi Yochanan. So clearly Rabbi Yochanan would have gone like his Rebbe, Rav Yanai. And what did he say? Chatzor ashutfin konin zemizeh. If it's a chatzor or shutfin, like simta, like a simta, which everybody has, they each can have a shus over that. You can acquire a chatzor. Your chatzor could be acquired for you like a simta. My love agavi karka doesn't mean on the karka, and therefore Rav Zera should have accepted what Rav Asi told him, that it doesn't have to be in the receptacle of the buyer on the ground is good enough. There's low, the talk kubaso. No, maybe it means like this. The chutzner of a shutfin accepted if he put it into my coop. In other words, chutzner of a shutfin is like a simta, meaning we all have permission to use it individually. I could use it, you could use it. It's not a Rosh Hashanah, which doesn't belong to anybody. Nobody can claim ownership in Rosh Hashanah, but a simta, I can use that for my needs, like my chutzner that I have a share in. So it maybe means only if I put into the kupa, only if I put into my box. In other words, maybe Rav Zera should not have accepted what Rav Asi said. Maybe Rav Asi was wrong. Rav Asi said that you put it on the Gavi Simta, you acquire it, that Rav Yochanan said that, even if it's not in the buyer's receptacle. Who says? Maybe it's only if you put it into the Simta. You can't prove it. How can I mistav? It's mistav that way, that it's only if you put it in the box. Why? Dom Rav Yaakov or Rav Yochanan. Rav Yaakov was another student of Yochanan, and he said, now here, look at the words, the first words of the Gemara. Rav Asi said in Rav Yochanan, you acquired. Rav Yaakov said in the name of Rav Yochanan, as we have, many times you have two different students quoting the rabbi, quoting their teacher in the opposite way. He seems to say the opposite. Rav Yaakov said in Rav Yochanan, that he doesn't acquire it. No, why wouldn't he acquire it? He just said before, Rav Asi said that in the name of Rav Yochanan, that if you measure, if the seller measured it and put it in the simta, you acquire it. And Rav Yaakov says you don't acquire it. Kasha Nadadi. So what are you going to say, that the two heard different members from Rav Yochanan? That's unlikely. And Rav Yanai also seems to say also that it could acquire. So how could that work? The difference is this: did he hear it? Did he put it? Did the seller put it? Did he measure it into the receptacle into the container of the buyer or not? Rav Asi, Rav Yochanan says, must have been into the container. In other words, Rav Asi was not correct in when he corrected Rav Zera. Says, what do you think? Into the receptacle for sure works. It means even not in the receptacle. No, but that goes against what Rav Yaakov said. Rav Yaakov said that you're not Kona. Why? Because he put it on the floor. He didn't put it into the receptacle. Must be only when he put it into the receptacle. So that's Tashma. We're going to try to bring another proof. Now we're going to try to prove, right, another kasha on Rav Asi. Tashma Marad v'lo mashach lo kana. What words are those? Our Mishnah, the second line in the Mishnah, right? Marad v'lo mashach lo kana, right? You're not quiet. My la b'simta. Doesn't that mean in a simta? And that shows that Rav Asi is wrong, meaning that if you didn't put it into the receptacle of the buyer, just measured it out and put it on the floor, that's my la b'simta, and still it doesn't work. So that's against Rav Asi. Again, a proof to what Rav Zera said. Rav Zera questioned him on. And Rav Yaakov said that it works only in a receptacle. He says, look, Rosh Hashanah. Maybe our Mishnah doesn't work because he did it in Rosh Hashanah. Maybe he measured it in Rosh Hashanah. You don't have Rosh Hashanah. You don't have ownership there. If a Mishnah is talking about Rosh Hashanah, a Maresha. What was the first words of our Mishnah? If you pulled them and you didn't measure them out, you don't have to measure out. Measure out is just how much you gave me. But once I agreed, I'll measure it later. It's a good kinyan. Why would that work if it's in Rosh Hashanah? If he pulled it without measuring kana, he acquired it. The first words of the Mishnah. Kana. How can you acquire it? Can Mashiach work in Rosh Hashanah? Mashiach, again, all these symbolic gestures are ways of demonstrating ownership, right? That ways of demonstrating ownership. You tear up the mortgage, that's a demonstration that you don't owe the money anymore. If you didn't tear it up, You still owe the money? No, you paid it all off. That's it. It's a demonstration of it's a demonstration of ownership. Well, pulling something in Rishus Rabim is not a demonstration of ownership. You didn't pull it if you own Rishus. So how could you say that the Mishnah is talking about Rishus Rabim? You say this is the kasha. The Marad B'Lamashach Lo Kana is a kasha on Ravasi, because according to Ravasi, even if you just measured it and put it on the floor, it's okay. It's a kinyan. How could it be a kinyan? Mishnah says Marad B'Lamashach Lo Kana. Oh, you say the Mishnah speaking of Rishus Rabim. How can Mishnah be Rishus Rabim? If it's Rishus Rabim, how could Mashiach work in the first line of Rishus Rabim? Yochim Eresh Mashav Labara Kana Mashiach Rishus Rabim. Can it work? Well, Abaye set up the rules about kinyanim, which we mentioned before. Mesira Kana Rishus Rabim. When you hand over the hawser, the rope, when you hand over the reins of the elephant or the camel, whatever that you can't pull, that works in Rishus Rabim. A place that doesn't belong to anybody, because that's your only option there. Mashiach Kana b'simta b'chatzah shisha shneim. A Mashiach is acquired by a simta, which is semi-private, or a chatzah shneim belongs to two people. Certainly, if you're moshev into your own chatzah, that works, right? But that's the preferred way. And Rashbam explains in the Mishnah. Rashbam's words are the lo shaycha Mashiach ele b'midi de la barak boy. Mashiach is only if you can't pick it up. If you can pick it up, it works, and it works b'chol makom. But what do you see over here? That Rishus Rabim Mashiach doesn't work, and only works in a private area or a semi-private area. So how can you say the Mishnah is speaking about Rishus Rabim? The answer is when the Mishnah says Mashiach, my Mashach nami diktani mir Rishus Rabim simta, means you pulled it from Rishus Rabim into your simta, or into your chatzah shneim, or into your private area for sure. You pulled it in there. That's what it means. So the Mishnah is really speaking about Rishus Rabim. Ravasi could say, if you put it down on the floor in a simta, it's also good. That's Ravashi secret, but it's better to say like Rav Meir, because Rav Yaakov and Rav Yana seem to go against him. Wait a minute. If you're pulling it into a simta, what does the sefer say? If he was smart, sochers makoma, and you'll hire its spot, right? Hire the tile. You'll rent the tile, and you'll be calling it that way. What do you mean smart? He's afraid that the seller will go back on the deal. He just quoted him a good price, so if you go back and they'll say he wants to acquire it right away. And it's, let's say he's not capable, he's in the seller's rishus, he doesn't want to wait till he pulls it and takes it out or whatever, and he can't lift it up. If he can lift it up, even in the seller's rishus. But it's, let's say it's heavier and he's got to pull it. If he's smart, he rents the spot. If we're talking Rishus Rabim, how could you rent the spot? Right? The Rishus Rabim, Miman Agar. Who are you going to rent it from? Rashbam says, Tosa says, that Rishus Rabim, the simta, you could rent it from the people who have access to it. The simta is like a private area. Here in Ramot, we have a lot of simtot, right? Simta this, simta that, the small streets. They're like small, semi-private streets. They're not really full streets. And it gives access to the people who live there. So you can rent it from the people who live there. But Rishus Rabim belongs to the whole world. You can't rent it from anybody. How could it be Rishus Rabim? This is what the sefer means. In B'shus Balami, it doesn't mean it's the same case. The first two cases of the Mishnah speaking about Rishus Rabim. Again, look at the Mishnah. What does it mean? I pulled it into a semi-private area from Rishus Rabim. If you measured it out and just stuck it on Rishus Rabim, there it wouldn't work. If you measured it and put it on the simta, even not in the buyer's receptacle, it would be okay. That's how Ravasi is going to learn the Mishnah. Is a different case entirely. If you were in the owners, the store owners, Rishus, and you want to acquire it and you're afraid he'll go back on the deal, what you can do is they say, I'm renting this spot. Here's $10. I'm renting this spot for 2 minutes, and I'm going to acquire the merchandise that way because it's in my chutzner. Rabbi Shmuel Damar Tabai, the last few words of the Mishnah, right? Rashbam also says, Rashbam 5 months from the bottom, I pointed out here, right? Here's the point that the Lo B'Shus Rabim, right? The Lo B'Shus Rabim, that Rashbam is going on the words Lo B'Shus Rabim in the Gemara. This is Lo B'Shus Rabim. In other words, this is we say that Mara V'Lo Mashach Lo Kana in Rishus Rabim, the way Ravasi is learning the Mishnah, even if you put it into the receptacle of the buyer in Rishus Rabim, come on, we're going to see that Caleb, Hagbah works everywhere. If I pick it up, even Rishus Rabim, my Caleb work, even in your store, even in the seller's Rishus. But in Rishus Rabim, it doesn't work, as we're going to talk about now. Rabbi Shmuel Dam Tavayu, Caleb Shal Adam Konula B'chol Makom. Your kalim, your receptacle, your container acquires it for you. It's like your chutzner. Rashbam says, "Caleb shalokech shalokech konolo." Impossible. Once you had agreed on a price, we agree that your vessel, your container should acquire kalikam mishmai. Let's say you said stam and you put it in the container. It's not clear, but your kalim do have the ability to acquire it for you any place. Chutz mishus rabim. Because there you don't have no rights to put it down anyway. So the kalim doesn't mean anything. If you're holding the kli in your hands, then it's akbah, and you picked it up already. Akbah works. But your kalim that you put down in Rishus Rab, you have no rishus to put it there. They say afilu Rishus Rab. It works in Rishus Rab. Now they seem to say a big chiddush. Rashbam said before, "Ein kev shokef kalam Rishus Rab," like we see. Rav Papa resolves this difference of opinion between Rav and Shmuel on the one hand and Rav Yochanan Shlokish on the other hand. These were the early Amoram. Rav and Shmuel on the one hand, and Rav Yochanan and Shlokish on the other hand. They both agreed on this. They say, "I feel b'shus Rabim, your kalim work. The buyer's container works even b'shus Rabim." Rav Papa resolves the two. Rav Papa lo pligi. There's really no machlokas between Rav Yochanan Shlokish on the one hand and Abai and Rabin on the other hand. Why? Are we talking about Rishus Rabim Simta? When Rabbi Shmuel say your kalim, the buyer's container on the floor can acquire from everywhere except for Rishus Rabim, that's really Rishus Rabim. Rishus Rabim doesn't work. When Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish said that it does work, your kalim work for you, even though they said Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, they didn't mean literally Rishus Rabim. They meant the simta. No machlokas. Everybody agrees your kalim work everywhere except for Rishus Rabim. But when Rabbi Yochanan said even Rishus Rabim, they didn't mean Rishus Rabim. They meant the simta. Amar Papa lo pliki kam Rishus Rabim kam besimta. Rav and Shmuel were talking about literally Rishus Rabim. It doesn't work there. Your kalim don't work there. Rabbi Yochanan said that it does work. They're talking about simta. My call Rishus. Why do they call Rishus Rabim? Call it a simta. She'ain Rishus Yachid. It means it's not a Rishus Yachid. It's an in between stage. It's not Rishus Yachid. It's not Rishus Rabim. It's mistaber that way. That what there's some machlok. Some are before Rabbi Yochanan. Kalim shalom kolam b'chol makom sheyesh lo rishus la'anicho. Right? You kalim work wherever you have permission to put it down. So Rabbi Yochanan, so you see over here that Rabbi Yochanan himself says that your kalim work wherever you have permission to put it down. Yesh lo rishus en lo rishus lo. You don't have permission to put it down in rishus rabim. So clearly, when Rabbi Yochanan said that your kalim work everywhere, even rishus rabim, he didn't mean literally rishus rabim. He meant it's not a rishus yachid. It means like a simta. What's the proof? Because Rabbi Yochanan himself said that your kalim work wherever you have permission to put them down. Only permission. You have permission to put them down, obviously, in your own rishus. You have permission to put them down in the seller's rishus if you're in his store and he wants to sell it to you. You have permission to put it down in a simta or in an area that you share. Fine. But ain't no rishus low. But if you have no rishus, you have no rishus to put in rishus Rav, Shema Mina. So you see that even Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Rav and Shmuel that your kalim do not work for you in rishus harab. All right, we're picking up Tashma, another proof we're going to start here tomorrow. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Mr. Hashem. Have a good day, everybody. Call to